This is the Better Ottawa Municipal Panel. Today is Wednesday, the 18th of June. My name is Neil Saravanamutu, as always. I'm joined by Joanne Chianello and John Willing. Hello to you both.
Hello. I thought you were saying, like, as always, I'm Neil Saravanamutu. That was good. I hope you're always Neil Saravanamutu.
I do my best.
Good evening.
Okay. Listen, let's jump straight into it. Last week, we went a little bit longer than we normally do. So let's get straight into the issues. And we had a by-election this week. John, tell us, out in Osgoode, who won? What do we know about the candidate, the councillor?
Well, I mean, first, yes, I'll tell you that Isabelle Skalski won the by-election, Greeley Community Association president. But I just want to note the notice that the City of Ottawa put out when they declared the results official. I'm just reading it here. The clerk's office declared the results official. Wonderful. And then the next paragraph, the elected candidate will take office immediately following the completion of their declaration of office. But they don't say who actually won the election, the by-election, in the notice. And
somebody won.
I'm like, the elected candidate, why don't they say who won the by-election? Like, my fear is that they're afraid to tip the political scales in any way. So we'll just make it neutral, say someone won. Go find out for yourself. It's just really.
They wrote it last week.
They might have just forgot to put it in the name. I don't know. But anyway, Isabelle Skalski, congratulations, new Osgoode Ward representative. And I don't know if she's been sworn in by the time we tape this pod.
I thought it was going to be Thursday. So
okay.
By the time people are listening to it, it might be, yeah.
Yeah, so a new representative, it'll be interesting to see what kind of path she forges around the council table, and especially for people in her ward. Some big issues coming up, as we've talked about on the pod, especially in the fall. Mm-hmm. So it's exciting to have some new blood around council, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure is. So, Joanne, I mean, as John mentions, we have some big issues coming up, things like Taywin and Lansdowne. What do we know about where Isabelle stands, or what she said publicly about those issues?
So I mean, she ran on, I think what a lot of rural councillors run on, and that is roads. And I don't say that lightly because it is a big deal. These are, like, Osgoode is a gigantic ward, and you have to drive everywhere you go. They are getting busier. There's more, like, suburban infrastructure is moving in. There's way more people. The roads can't take them. People want to cycle, pedestrians, and so they're not safe. There's actually, like, farm equipment out on roads, and farm equipment, it sounds kind of charming, but actually this is like giant industrial machinery, so it can be dangerous. So safer roads for everyone, maybe paving shoulders, sidewalks places, help cyclists, and the usual kinds of things like, more police. Good luck with that. Recreation things like that. But on the big issues, she has said publicly, for example, Lansdowne, no. She is against at least in this current plan, the Lansdowne 2.0. I think she said recently she can think of a better way to spend $430 million. And as we know, it's going to be more than $430 million. Also, as well, she said, and I think this was like at one of those CBC candidate questionnaires, asked if she would spend, or maybe your questionnaire, actually, I'm not sure. One of them is asked about the NHL. Would you give public money to an NHL arena? She said no. Again, we haven't seen that deal yet, so no. And on Taywin, Taywin is a giant issue in Osgoode because it is actually located in Osgoode Ward. Yeah. To be honest, she's a little bit mushy on that, right? Like, it was a little bit like, this is a controversial issue here. Some people welcome more people. Other people say it's changing the dynamics of our ward. And at the Carlsbad Springs debate, which we talked about, I think last May, right? Yeah. I guess that's just last month. She said she wasn't sure if she would vote for the motion to remove Taywin, the one that was tabled by Teresa Kavanaugh, who held it back because the councillor said, well, we should actually wait till Osgoode has an actual councillor before we vote on this. And she hesitated, so I'm not sure what's going to happen there because she just said we don't have enough information. We have to make sure this is a good deal for all taxpayers. But on the other hand, she said, well, we've also seen an opinion by some city staff that, this is a lot of uncertainty. It would open us up to legal challenges, and, businesses could not actually, count on what we're doing. So we'll see what happens there. I'm not sure. And it will be interesting to see which candidates got money from whom. Like, I know Taggart did actually support some candidates, and that is made public within 5 months, at least in the normal elections. So I think that will always be interesting to see. So it'll be interesting because, Giroux's definitely voted for Taywin. He voted for Lansdowne. Former councillor George Giroux, who's now an MPP. So it'll be interesting to see if she votes differently than he is.
Yeah. Well, John, what's your take on that? Because this council, in fact, for a number of years now, has been largely characterized by this split between urban councillors and versus suburban rural. And, it's sort of, what is it, like maybe a 12, 11, 14 split, something like that. And as you mentioned, Joanne, George Giroux was very much in that pattern. What do we expect from Isabelle? Early days, of course, but...
Well, she's a rural councillor, right? So she's going to represent the interest of her rural ward, and she said this in her commentary in the press and in the Q&As that she wants to represent her rural ward and the issues that Joanne just outlined, right? So I don't think there's going to be a massive split. Although the Lansdowne issue is really fascinating because so we're talking about citywide issues. And so that's where an interesting vote going the other way, where it would have gone in favor of Lansdowne with former Councillor Giroux there. And so maybe, I don't know, would Councillor-elect Skalski have some sway trying to convince her colleagues around the table to vote against Lansdowne? I don't know.
Will she be under pressure to vote for it? Right?
Well, I mean, she talked in one of her, I think it was her, I can't remember if it was her interview with The Outlook or her answers to the CBC, how she doesn't consider herself a politician, and a lot of
everyone says
exactly this. And then,
Mayor keeps saying that.
The fact of the matter is, they are now politicians, and so they're going to have to think politically. And for Ms. Skalski, she's going to have to think about the next election if she's going to run. I assume she will in 2026. So this is her training ground, and she's setting a runway, I would assume, for the municipal election, general municipal election in 2026. But no. Back to your original question, Neil. She's representing a rural ward, and I expect she'll bring those concerns to the table.
Yeah. Okay, Joanne. Last quick question about the Osgoode by-election, and that's, so there was 25% turnout, which was quite a bit lower than what we saw. Yeah. But amazingly, Isabelle was a candidate going into it with very little name recognition, up against the former mayor of Osgoode, Doug Thompson, who obviously had a lot of, has been around for a very long time, and everyone in the ward knows him. How do you think Isabelle was able to break through? I mean, she got 34% of the vote versus Thompson's 23%.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to say I am not on the ground in Osgoode. I saw some stuff online and looked at the candidates, but I wasn't there talking to people. So this mini analysis is like basically looking at data and on the ground, like and results and things like that. But when you have a very low turnout, it does not take a lot to win. Yeah. So yes, she got, what did it say, 34% of the vote, but that's a little over 6,000 votes to win an entire ward. And
6,000 in total. And yes. Of which Isabelle got.
Right. I apologize. That's right. Like, she won with only 2,100 votes, like 2,115. I'm looking off my camera onto my other screen where I have numbers. And 2,000 people is not a lot of people, right? To actually send somebody to city council to make billion-dollar decisions. And we say that she doesn't have a lot of name recognition. Maybe not to us, but maybe to people in Osgoode, because Greeley is actually the largest village in all of Osgoode. So it's got the most people. And when you have this low of a turnout, those community association and all, like what I like to call the municipal nerds, people like us, people are paying attention, they're involved in their community associations. Those people know these people, right? And so she probably does have some name recognition. Okay. Plus, from what I could see, she's pretty well spoken in that. As for Doug Thompson, I don't want to be mean, but I always think, and not to him personally, but all former politicians, sadly, believe that they are well loved and well remembered, and people might remember and well love them, but that doesn't mean they want to send them back to office. And that is especially true as they get farther away from when they were originally in office. So, John,
I was just quickly going to mention, because I don't know if we mentioned it, but the voter turnout in the by-election was about 24%. So low, not unusual for past by-elections necessarily in the city of Ottawa. I think the last by-election
Okay.
was in the same ballpark. But I mean, look, 24%, terrible, strikes to the heart of municipal nerds like us, right? Like, oh my gosh! But we're coming
Yeah.
off of a federal election, other elections in the past, and so it's not good when you see a low voter turnout like that.
And obviously, for Osgoode Ward, like Taywin wasn't the controversial vote issue that as big a controversy as some might think, because otherwise it would have brought out more people, right? So
yeah, for sure.
So we'll see.
Sure.
It'll be interesting to have around the table, though. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And congratulations, Isabelle. Let's move on to topic number 2, which is the trail road replacement. So the trail road, we have a municipal dump. It is going to be full within 10 to 15 years. And council's been presented with 3 options as to what they can do about this. They can build a new municipal dump, they can build a waste incinerator, or they can use privately owned landfills. So Joanne, can you tell us more about these options and where the discussion is heading?
Sure. And I just want to preempt that with saying, yes, the landfill trail will be full to capacity in about 10 years if we do nothing. But the city is actually doing a number of things, including not accepting like industrial and commercial waste. And the big thing is they have applied to expand Trail Road. Stage 6, I believe. It might be the 6th time. But that takes up to 10 years to decide. So we won't actually know whether it's large enough, whether we can expand it until we run out of room, which is a little bit of a catch-22 situation. But yeah, so these 3 options are pretty straightforward. One is called status private dump, and that is status quo private dump with a slash in between. We keep using Trail Road hopefully as efficiently as we can, and when we run out of that, we pay people to take our garbage. It seems very unethical to me, but on the other hand, it is actually like money-wise. Well, it's kind of a double-edged sword because the capital outlay is 0, right? Like the getting a landfill, finding a so-called waste to energy, which is basically burning garbage as an incinerator. These are many hundreds of millions of dollars, anywhere from $450 million to $800 million. They're very similar, and we'd have to pay nothing for a private company. The only problem is that then you are at the like what happens if that private company goes out of business? What happens if they want to increase their rates? I mean, obviously we'll have a contract with them, but we remember when we had a private contract with Osgoode Ward, how well that went. So everything has their pros and cons. Of course, as I was mentioning, waste to energy, get an incinerator. The famous one in Ontario is in Durham. And there's pros and cons to that. It's extremely expensive. It is not super great for the environment. I think people think it's fine. Yes, you capture some energy, but the greenhouse gases on it are terrible. And in fact, a landfill is much better for greenhouse gases because more of them are captured. And then the landfill option, the city kind of said they are looking at that anyway, because even if you get an incinerator, there's stuff left over that, there's the stuff that is not burned and things you can't send to the incinerator, and you need some landfill option anyways. That, of course, would be a huge problem because who wants a landfill, right? In their backyard, no one.
Or an incinerator.
Okay. Well,
trail. Anyway, so those are the 3 options. They're fairly close. Most expensive are the new landfill and the incinerator.
And Joanne, those are somewhere between $500 million and $1 billion, right?
Well, I think it's 800, right? But it's going to keep going up. So it's a lot of money.
So John, I was listening to the council debate discussion on this, or the committee's discussion, and there seems to be a lot of people leaning towards incineration, and that's people talking about this as new technology versus the status quo. Now, I have to admit, and this is a bit of maybe you don't either, but incineration seems to be something that other municipalities have done, but I think there's a bit of a movement away from it for the points that Joanne said. I mean, Joanne, you're talking about the greenhouse gas emissions, but there's also the issue of air pollutants, which delegates mentioned, which wasn't something that city staff had really highlighted. So, John, what's your take on this? Or are we moving towards incineration?
I don't know. I remember though remember when the Plasco debate. Remember Plasco, guys? Do you guys remember
Oh
Plasco?
my God, I wrote so much about
The
Glasgow.
magic technology that was actually like on paper looked great, like superheat garbage. And you come out with stuff you can use in the roads, and you got this. You sell the energy to the grid.
Except that it didn't work.
Yeah, I can't commercialize it, and so I think. Look, I think the city will have to look at something that's not a dump. And it's interesting because during the Plasco debate, a lot of people say, I can't believe. Well, actually, it was more about the debates about the private landfills that have popped up on the east side of the city and the west side of the city. And people are complaining, how in the 21st century, we're burying waste. How can we do this? This is despicable. We shouldn't be burying waste anymore. And now I heard some of the debate at committee this week saying, you know what? Burying the waste, if you engineer it right and you take the sludge from it and treat it, properly, it's better than the incinerator. And so I think, personally, guys, I think this is going to be it's going to be the burning issue for city council in the very near future. And I think it's serious. And I think yes, we have some time until Trail Road, fills up the footprint we know it today. But it seems like this issue keeps getting kicked by councils.
Yeah.
Glasgow didn't work, so that council kind of kicked it ahead. So now we're at a point where I think council has to make a decision about what path to take, and they are through this process. We're seeing a committee, which is great. And so now it comes back to our favorite topic, right, guys? Consultation. And so it's going to take a lot of public consultation, I think, on this file over the next couple of years. And in that time, who knows? Maybe, cross your fingers, there'll be more technology and new technology that will replace incineration.
I don't know, I don't want to prolong this too much, but I also heard some people open to privatization. The idea is maybe we should get out of the waste, of the waste business. That Taggart site down at Carlsbad Spring, they get all the Taggart projects down there, it seems. That was supposed to be a big commercial recycling facility and garbage issue and whatever, but they have a big application in to the Ontario government to change over to residential waste. So if that goes through, can we send our waste there? We already send we're starting next year. We're going to start to send 30% of residential waste to different areas. Can we somehow divert more garbage and from the landfill and extend it? I mean, John, remember when we went to Trail Road? Did you get to come on that? The reporters went on basically a field trip to Trail Road. It was pristine. It was amazing. It was like I'd never been to it. Well, that's not true. I went to a dump in Red Lake where there was actually big bears walking around. It's not that. It is fantastic. And I think some of the delegates made that comment that we talk as if we think incineration is this high tech solution and landfill is no tech, or we're just throwing garbage in a big pit. That is not how it works, right? So it'll be interesting to see how they do the public engagement and education on that when you decide, because what the council is going to decide is to do a deeper dive on these before they figure out which one they want to choose, which will be terrible. Terrible.
Listen, I mean, all three of us have been watching long enough Ottawa City Council that we remember the Plasco fiasco. And thanks for letting me get that one in. But it does point to this issue that, and Councillor David Brown brought this up, that the city does not have a great track record right now with big projects. And so this idea of either, those projects, as you mentioned, Joanne, they're big numbers we're talking about. And those are very, very preliminary numbers. So who knows what the final would be. $1 billion for either of those options would be easy, whether it's an incinerator, whether it's a new municipal dump. Do we trust the city to go ahead with another big project like that?
I just what's the choice, right? I mean, I have to say, I hate to pick favorites at the city, but I actually think the environment and the waste management staff folks have been doing a really good job, right? And I mean, if you think about the amount of consultation and what you know about this project compared to, say, transit, and what we found out during the inquiry, so far they're on a really good track. And staff can only do what council tells them to do. I also would say, if you look back at the first LRT contract, Infrastructure Ontario helped manage that. That didn't exactly protect us from anything. So, we're gonna have to do something. But what I hope those things like the LRT public inquiry, with my favorite man in the world, Justice Horrigan, like when he talked about, the approach of senior city officials controlling the narrative. I hope that councillors will have learned, like, you have to like demand facts. If you don't think you know what's going on, ask the questions, because I don't see what the options are other than the city actually making a decision and executing a contract of some kind.
And I should say quickly, guys, Ottawa is not the only municipality, certainly in Ontario, that's dealing with trash talk right now. It's like the city of Toronto is going through a similar discussion. Right. I know outside of in the GTA, like there's just talk about like how trash is being managed. So this is a province-wide, I think, the discussion point right now. And you're going to see a lot of municipalities looking at each other saying, well, what are they doing? What are they doing? And maybe relying off each other's intel and research to make a decision for their own citizens.
Yeah, and then there's like this whole other thing about like what to do with hazardous waste, what to do with recycling, which is actually a provincial responsibility, and they're not taking responsibility for it. So that's really complicating matters. But I'm not going to get into that, Neil, because we were long.
Okay, let's move on to our third topic.
Okay.
And also at the Environment Committee, there was a discussion around advertising on city properties for fossil fuel. Like should we be doing fossil fuel advertising on buses, on bus shelters, on city properties? That came back. So, John, what's the latest on this? This has come to council and committee once or twice before.
It's been around. So I don't want to spend too much time talking about the memo that went to council. There's a lot of legal stuff in there, right? But essentially, staff are saying, with new federal, I guess, regulations from the Competition Bureau, right, about greenwashing, they should essentially leave it in the federal jurisdiction and not do anything locally at the municipal political level. That's pretty much the very broad strokes. In other words, the city staff are recommending don't do anything to prevent the oil and gas industry from advertising on municipal assets in the city of Ottawa.
So one of the arguments that was used, it was quite a rich debate. Like a number of delegates came out, and Joanne, they were saying largely that this is normalizing fossil fuels. We're supposed to be trying to transition to clean energy, and here we are normalizing it. There was talk about the legal risk, like it was, would we get in trouble for trying to ban one type of advertising? So, and then the other issue was that no other municipality in Canada has done this yet. And so, we should, that's the reason why we should not move forward. Do you accept that argument? Do you like, where do you stand on this?
Well, I see what you mean. Like the idea that no one else has done it that is not the reason you shouldn't do it if you think it's the right thing to do. Of course, you should be first and have the courage of your convictions. The legal argument is tricky. This has come up a couple of times with, anti-abortion advertising in buses. Like there are charter protections against that, of just banning things. And I should say that the new federal laws are pretty good in that they ban what basically greenwashing is, pretending that something is, great for the environment when it isn't. That is like not on. And for sure, the city should be very strict about advertising that is misleading, like advertising from fossil fuels that is misleading, for example. But I don't know. Like, I don't know that, like, this is a big hill. It'll become controversial. Is this the thing they want to do? Because I would rather that council and the city put more energy into making this, into actually making the city more environmentally sustainable than having this long debate. Again, like they're going to watch this. There is actually, I think there's a legal challenge to these new Competition Bureau guidelines on anti-greenwashing. So they're watching what's happening there, and certainly we should be very strict on ads that do actually mislead people or misinform people. But to say, like, for example, Enbridge, I don't know if they even advertise with the city. I'm picking on them. To say that they cannot ever advertise, we're kicking up a big can of worms that, like, with so many other issues that I don't think, like, I don't know that that's the thing I would pick. I would choose. I would rather actually that we fight to have more electric buses on the road and that our LRT is working, because I think that's going to be a better option for us.
John, did you want to jump back in on this?
Yeah, no, I agree with Joanne on this completely. It's like instead of instead of waging what would probably be a multi-year legal battle, because someone's going to challenge it in court if the city does this, instead of spending tens of thousands of dollars doing that, why not keep working to become less of a customer of the oil and gas industry? And by doing stuff like electrifying our transit fleet and maybe the rest of our fleet too. And I just don't know.
We do our own advertising, right? Our own,
Sure.
Like,
and we talked on the pod, like some of the the city's trying to figure out what legal battles to wage right now, right? We talked about the bubble bylaw and how that could take away from like going into the Uber file and seeing how that's going. So adding another kind of Hail Mary on the I think Hail Mary on the shoulders of city lawyers, it might be too much to ask at this point.
I have to say, actually, I disagree with you both. I think that it is worth doing. Maybe it'll get challenged, but it's a little bit like where we were in maybe the 1970s with tobacco advertising. We just said, look, this is harmful. We got to stop this. So I see the parallel there. I think we should go with it, but I also am not naive enough to recognize that I don't see a lot of support around the council. Like I don't see enough support around the council table for this. So it's on a slow burn, that's for sure. Okay. And we are on to the lightning round.
Yes.
Joanne, you're up first. Okay, get my clock here. The NCC opened a swimming dock at Dow's Lake. And I have to say, I tried it. I was impressed. But what's your take on swimming at Dow's?
Well, I would say that the last time I was in the canal was Frosh Week 1988. It was not fresh and clean feeling the way I have been hearing from people like Yasser Naqvi and Catherine McKenna, my pals there. So I think it's fantastic. It is fantastic that they've done this, and also that there's, I love the River House, but it's a little bit farther from my house. I'm glad there's one closer. Great for tourists. I mean, we should be able to swim in the city. We have these fantastic, so much waterfront in the city that is not actually used. I'd love to be out on the water. So hats off to NCC. That is a great project. It looks fantastic. I want this extra time. Answer to you.
Okay, you've got an extra 10, 20 seconds. As I say, I actually tried it, went swimming there. It felt really clean. It just felt really natural. I have to say that it's in hindsight, it's like, why didn't we do this sort of 20 years ago, right? Because
it was not clean and great. And the river keeper says they've been testing it all the time. It's really good. So the river keeper,
good.
I trust the river.
So, John, on a related note, as Joanne mentions, we actually have a lot of waterfront in this city. Should we be doing more with that waterfront?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Give us more access to the water. I went for a bike ride, guys, last weekend, early in the morning. I went up to Kawiki Point on the Air Gallery for the first time. And I mean, that's not really necessarily access to the water, but boy, the view of the Ottawa River from there is spectacular. And that alone is really nice just to see the water. But actually going down to touch the water like you did at Dow's, I think and I went down, I took a bike ride down to where Dow's Lake is too, and people were doing laps early in the morning too. It was fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
So I know the NCC, this is something on the NCC's mind, trying to give more people to the access to the waterways, whether it be the canal, the Ottawa River. I think it's interesting. Westboro Beach looks great too. It's interesting. I think there's going to be a little bit of barrier. I don't know for the people you talk to, but the people I talk to, it's like, ooh, swimming in the Rideau Canal, gross. I'm not going to do that. So I think there's a little bit of a mind adjustment for people, but it might be a slow go until we get there.
Yeah. Swimming in open water for a lot of people is a bit of a barrier. Like, it's particularly like ocean's one thing, but in a lake or a river or whatever, so it is a barrier for a lot of people. But I got to say, it was great. I loved every minute of it. Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear that.
Joanne, you are on about rats. Tell us about rats.
Okay, well, I hate to tell you this, but with this warm weather, it's also rat season, apparently, because this is when they start breeding. So in 2023, the city started a rat mitigation working group because there were so many rats. In 2022, do you remember this, John? I think we were both still working in journalism. Yeah, 747 complaints to the city on rat sightings. Super gross. And so they started this working group that is like, public education on like not leaving food out, and we have to clean up after our garbage and how construction sites can clean up after themselves. And even like they started last year, I believe, putting baiting the sewers, which is basically very controlled and minimal poisoning of the sanitary sewers, because one rat showed up in somebody's toilet in Old Ottawa South, like through the sewer. Yeah, just horrific things. But also, Layton Johnson also suggested that we try to give rats birth control. Remember that story? She did not make that up. There are programs in Seattle and New York City, but I don't know whatever happened. The report doesn't talk about that. So anyway, Tim Tierney, who had last year saw in his ward of Beacon Hills Serval that the calls about rat sightings were going up. He asked how that's going, and they're still working on it. And I am happy to say that it seems to be going in the right direction. So I just quickly want to say, looking at my numbers over here off the side, so in 2024, there were 512 calls to 311 about the rats. And so far, as of early June, only 72. Now, the high rats, the peak season is the spring and fall. So we haven't got there yet. But I don't think we're going to get up to 500. So it seems to be working. And if you see a rat, you can either call 311 or go online to the rat sighting reporting tool, where you can explain what you've seen and also upload a photo if you like. So that is how the city is serving you. So.
Okay. Thanks for the update on rats, Joanne. I've got a question for both of you, and this comes from our listener, Catherine, asked how, actually kind of like putting the onus on us, saying how can the municipal panel get council to take the fiscal issue more seriously? And I'm like, I don't think that's quite our job. But
they really love to. They're always thinking, what is the municipal panel saying we should do? Like I'm pretty sure that's top of their mind. Yeah, when they make decisions.
But in all seriousness, I mean, the last couple of weeks we've been talking about fiscal issues, and that something's got to give at some point, right? Do we think that's going to happen with this council? Like, what is your prediction for the next? Is it 2 budgets? 2 more budgets to go? In terms of one more budget to go. Okay, right. Oh yeah. What do you think? What do you think we're going to see in that final year? I mean, election year.
I have to say,
let's answer the question, Neil. I think right there.
This is the goofiest strategy I've ever seen. Like, we should have had 8 or 9 or 10, like Toronto did, % year one, and then move on to 2.5 or 3% or 4, which seems more reasonable, the year before the election. So now we're really low. I think we're going to be very low on money. I don't know. I think there are people who I keep talking to people who realize something's got to give, but this is not the year they want to give it, right? And so I kind of fear for how much money we're going to have in 2026. I don't know, John. What do you think?
With all things, governments are sometimes often reactionary. So I would knock on wood, but sometimes it takes something major happening, like a major water main break, or like a major road opening, or something. Hopefully not a building. Something happened to a municipal asset, like a building, but something kind of bad has to happen for politicians to act and start thinking more closely about something like asset maintenance. So I hope nothing like that happens. But to Catherine's question, how do we get politicians to raise taxes in an election year? I'm not holding my breath, but again, we're going to see, our report in the fall about how we're going to pay for our asset maintenance in the future, and maybe that will toggle some minds around council.
Okay.
I also think people have to tell people that they're willing to pay more, which I don't think they want to, right? And how do we explain where the money goes? We don't do a very good job of that. So I think we can do that.
Yeah. I mean, that's, a first step is explaining how the current money is being allocated and why, if we want to do something new, we need additional money for that. And that discussion is really not happening, as I think you mentioned. Okay, John, last question to you. Was it last week or the week before we were talking about alcohol in parks? I think we've actually talked about it a couple times.
Every week.
We should talk about it every week.
Yeah, that and pills. And you suggested, John, that we do a pod in the park. So why don't you tell us more about what you have in mind?
I don't know. I was just thinking a ParkPod with some pills. I don't know. ParkPod would be good. I don't know. I'm thinking a 6-pack, a park. No, I don't know. But it would be cool to take the pod on the road somewhere in a park. that's, legally allowed, where we can, consume alcohol, of course, 5 meters away from a playground and a beach or wherever else, wherever the rules are. But I think that's something we could do. Hey guys, I think we have to talk to maybe producer Henry about all the logistics too.
Well, that sounds great. And so on that note, and as you say, we want to get out there. So if there's any communities that will find out July 1st that they have a park that is alcohol accessible, let us know. And if you want us to come out, we will try to come out to that park and do a pod. If we get the technology working. Okay. Listen, that's it for this week. I want to thank John and Joanne. I want to thank everyone for listening. Please leave us a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts, and we will do our best to respond to them in the next podcast. We'll be back next week. Until then, this has been the Better Ottawa Municipal Panel.